Hi, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of the Layoff Legends podcast, where resilience meets reinvention. I'm Leo, a product builder and storyteller, learning and turning my Microsoft layoff into a different path. With each pod, I sit down with legends who are rebuilding their lives after layoffs and with the experts who are helping them navigate these crossroads. My guest today is Inyang, the co-founder of First Street Partnerships, where he helps business leaders and communities harness AI for growth, creativity, and economic opportunity. Now, Monk has also had his own layoff journey that he's going to share shortly, and today he is on a mission to make AI practical, accessible, and culturally relevant, ensuring underrepresented communities do not get left behind. He's led marketing and partnerships at Anheuser-Busch, guided investor strategy at Conduent, and today serves as the VP, in addition to his role at First Street, of the Montclair Board of Education. He's an executive coach, blending strategic expertise with storytelling and innovation to empower people to use AI with confidence. Monk, it is so delightful to have you. Welcome to the Layoff Legends podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Actually, now president of the Montclair Board of Ed this year, which has been a big change in my final year on the board with everything else that's going on.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
For those who don't know who you are, in addition to the intro, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Monk Inyang. I am the co-founder and CEO of First Street Partnerships. I am from Newark, New Jersey, co-founded the organization with my brother. We both grew up in Newark and have really been around the tech and finance space for quite some time, and now really leaning into AI, as is a million people, but really focusing on what it looks like for our community. What's been helpful is when you have that focus on us, I think it makes you better in general. Having that core aspect is something that I don't see a lot of folks doing now. So we're really excited about what we have coming up.
That's fascinating. And one of the things I love is that you're tracking the journey. So as these things get released, that you are actually on the cutting edge along with the technology, bringing that to underrepresented communities. And would love to learn about your layoff journey, because really that's where this all started. As we look into this season, we're really learning how people really transformed that trajectory from that dip in career to something that ultimately became, a launch pad to something different. Could you walk us through that?
So my last corporate job and where I got laid off from was Anheuser-Busch. I was leading influencer and entertainment partnerships across the North America region. At that time, I've been there for 3 years and had really been moving into the marketing space and kind of enjoying that work. I don't know if your audience might remember, but a couple of years ago there was a massive controversy with Bud Light working with a trans influencer, Dylan Mulvaney, and that led to boycotts that led to billions of dollars being lost for the organization. So my team was actually the team that was involved in kind of putting that deal together for Bud Light, and because we handled influencer partnerships. So by the time the layoff happened in August of 2023, that controversy had been going on since April of that year. So there's a lot of conversations about what does this mean? Who are we marketing to? When you see conversations about your job being brought up in the White House with the press secretary while Biden was in office. It's just really wild and kind of surreal to be a part of that, especially in marketing where you were already a part of things that millions of people would see, like a Super Bowl commercial. But for me, it was a tough time. Looking back on it, was extremely stressful because obviously things were not going well. There weren't any clear answers. Our team was tasked with relooking at all of our partnerships and what does that mean and what direction should we be going in. So there was a lot of moving parts at that moment. So I wouldn't say I was completely caught off guard, but you're always, kind of caught off guard when the moment actually strikes. It was the first round of real layoffs that were happening at the company at that time. I think there's been at least 3 since, but I remember that day very clearly. I'm on the train to go into the office and get a text or get an email for an in-person emergency meeting in like the next 20 minutes, very early in the morning. And I texted my wife and said, I think I'm going to get fired today. I don't know what's going on. I think something is happening. And by the time I got to the office, it was almost like a conveyor belt. There was a lot of us getting let go at the same time. And you were kind of getting called into this office to have that final conversation. And then I hope you the best. So it was rough, really tough on me in that transition. It was the first time I ever been laid off in my career. I changed careers pretty often, but it was the first time I'd been laid off, and getting that feeling of all the ideas and roadmap that I had for my career, it's over. Like I'm not doing that anymore. Now, now what am I going to do?
Wow, what a change. And there's so many things that we can kind of go down on in terms of that experience and national attention and the pressure and the introspection that that probably started for you. What'd you do right after the news?
Yeah, so there were a lot of coworkers of mine who also got laid off at the same time. And in fact, the office was small. There wasn't a lot of Black and brown folks that worked in the office, and a good amount of them got laid off that particular day, along with a bunch of other people. But that day, we went down the street to a pizza restaurant slash bar that was open at o'clock in the morning, and just congregated to just talk about what's going on, what do you want to do next, and have that moment of just letting it out in that first moment. So that day was just kind of reliving everything that's been going on over the last 3 years and how we got to this point, and then going home and trying to figure out what tomorrow is going to look like. Again, it was completely uncharted territory for me. And at the time I was really focused on, well, I'll just find another corporate job and kind of get into another place and keep things moving.
So interesting. I think that there are bonds that form when we go through conflict at whatever
Mhm.
level. And when it sounds like you were with this team throughout the work conflict with this controversy and then now being laid off together. So there was definitely some bonding that happened in that situation for sure.
But definitely, it brought us closer, and you had someone who kind of knew what you were going through, and you could talk to about the frustrations you had and everything that kind of comes in a moment like that.
Wow. And so, having been in that intensity, how did you step back? It sounds like you had an identity that was really wrapped into this really intensive piece of work. It was being tested. And so, you guys had to stand by the work. And then suddenly the rug was pulled out under you. That must have been quite a whiplash. Did you have any sense of identity crisis or identity loss when you were kind of going through this sudden shift?
Yeah, I mean, if I were to really document it, it was probably several stages of grief in that change and realization of where I was in the ecosystem of the organization. What was interesting is that Anheuser-Busch is a massive marketer, spend, billions of dollars on marketing every few years. And so the disconnect was that the company is very focused or very experienced with sports marketing and everything that goes into sports partnerships. So the work I was doing on the entertainment side, which was kind of focused on getting Budweiser into the next Top Gun movie, and what show are we going to have our drinks on, and what partnerships and all of those things. That was much more young in the organization. When I got laid off, there was a period of time where I was thinking to myself that I was pushing a stone uphill, because my job entailed excelling at the thing that I did while evangelizing that this should be a thing that we should do at a bigger level. And so it was like a double level of stress where, as an organization, they made it clear that we haven't fully bought into this. We think there's something here. See what you got, and come back to us and show us what's going on. So there was this constant feeling of proving yourself while also trying to push things forward and all of that. So that realization in the layoff it hit me very hard, because it made me realize that a lot of the stress that I had came from that, right? Fitting a square into a round hole, and that being your job, like your job being to be an evangelist of something in your own work that we're not really that focused on. So that releasing that stress and releasing the idea that I was trying to forge something very new here, and everything that came with it was helpful. But on the other end, what was really sad was that, I had this plan. I had been doing corporate finance and strategy for about 12 years before I went into Anheuser-Busch, and I was tired of it. I really didn't enjoy it. I'm a creative at heart. I write. I had written two middle school novels at the time that I was at Anheuser-Busch. So what even brought me there was trying to get into a corporate job that infused a little bit more creativity. So the literal kind of transition into the company was to do finance, for a marketing company. So I did it for Michelob Ultra and got exposed to a lot of creative, and then eventually created the role that I got laid off from a year later. But that entertainment partnership and everything like that. And so the part that was really painful to see was that in that world of entertainment partnerships and the folks that I would meet with, especially the Black creators, there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. And there was this vision I had in the future of like, man, if I could stay here for like 3 years with this big brand behind me, these big budgets behind me, even if they're not fully investing in it, what they do give me is so needed in the community of Black creatives that I could really build a reputation and drive some projects forward that you would be surprised to be able to do, having been that you've only started doing this for a few months or for not even for a year. So in that short period of time, I met people who I had always like looked up to. I had conversations with Issa Rae and Ryan Coogler and like talked about potential partnerships. And so I'm just imagining that, man, if I get to do this and continue moving on, in 3 years, I could probably go do this on my own or go to a place that really does focus on this. And so to have that kind of pulled out that early was about a year and a half into that process was tough.
I think a lot of us in these large companies find that where you have this passion, but you really rely on the strength of the brand that you're working for as kind of an implicit endorsement. It's like, wow, I work for Google, I work for Anheuser-Busch. And because of that, there's a sense of credibility, there's a sense of autonomy, there's a sense of impact that you have. And then you suddenly have to reset that once
Yeah.
it's not behind you anymore. And you have to discover your own voice, so to speak. Did you experience that?
No, absolutely. I mean, working at Anheuser-Busch is one of those jobs that I would make jokes that like, man, I don't know if I could have handled this in my 20s because I would be at all the events. You have access to all of these things, right? There's the Super Bowl, there's the award shows, because they're advertising at all these things, have partnerships with all these different folks. So they need people to do these things. And so it's very easy. And there was a bunch of people that I worked with where it becomes your personality. It's your Instagram account is the greatest Instagram account that any of your friends are going to follow because I was here and then I'm here and this is who I met and look at me at this thing and we're at this bar and all those things. And because you have that brand behind you, you're in things that you normally would not be a part of, especially at your age, especially at that point in your career, all of that. I think what helped me was that before I got laid off, the exposure to Black creatives and the exposure to trying to push forward Black projects. And mind you, I was only able to push forward maybe 10% of my budget where was able to work with these creatives. But just seeing that, I got exposure to the idea that that actually was much more fulfilling than a big Super Bowl campaign or being at the CMAs, for instance, where maybe I don't have any real connection to it, but it's a job. But it's obviously at a bigger scale, but it's not as fulfilling for me personally. So losing that aspect wasn't as harmful or didn't hit me as deeply because in that time frame I was moving to, I actually like working with my people a lot more. And so it's cool. I mean, this job, I went to the Super Bowl for the first time in my life, lifelong dream, and that was definitely cool. And I'll never complain about that. But seeing the vision of like carving your path, doing the work that you really want to do, I had seen enough so that I was able to kind of tie back to that when it was all over. Remember that feeling you had? What if you kind of create it? Because I had seen enough to realize that it's not necessarily the size, but it is like the project that you're doing, the work that you're doing, the impact that you have, and that was much more fulfilling for me.
That's so powerful. You tap into something that I think is relevant for all of us, but where it started for you, a lot of us don't have access to. You are in the rooms, the Super Bowl, talking with all these really star-studded people. And so you saw the glamour and the glitz of it all, but you weren't carried away by that. So that in the midst of all that magic, you were still able to retain your authentic voice, or at least your authentic seeking. You talked about working with Black creatives, and that's what kind of did it for you. Could you walk us through that just a little bit? How were you able to separate that? Because it's so easy to get caught up in all
Yeah.
of it and lose your voice. How did you maintain yours during that journey?
I think to be honest, it's because I had that job in my mid 30s as opposed to my mid 20s. And marketing is a young man, young woman's game. So there Me being in my mid 30s was I was kind of close to an elder, statesman on the floor because everyone's in their 20s. So mid 30s, you're supposed to be a senior leader at this point.
You are an old head at this point.
I'm an old head. I was like, it's like being an athlete where they're like, he's 32. I don't even know if he has it anymore. It was a very different thing. So I think being in my mid 30s, having two kids, a wife, having that exposure and that kind of nucleus, when you get brought into it, it is it's incredible. It's exciting. But you do have this element of like you've seen enough things to kind of realize like I don't really care about this too much. I'm not in the club scene anymore. The way like going to a club and just showing off doesn't excite me the way it would when I was in my early 20s. So I think that really helped and developing my voice in what are the things I really am good at, what are the projects I really do want to work on, and getting some small wins. Like we worked with Issa Rae when she had her first show after Insecure, which was on HBO, and that was one that very early on I remember putting decks together, thinking to myself, I can't believe I need to explain to people who Issa Rae is, but okay, this is Issa Rae. She has this new show coming out. We need to partner. And so worked with her team and the leads, gave them their first brand deal with Stella Artois, and having that win and doing it on a budget way less than what, my counterparts were using for their projects really kind of gave that like, no, this felt completely different, even the conversations, even the calls, right? Like you're on a call with the client and it's a different conversation that you're having back and forth because we have similar experiences there. We view things similarly. I'm a creative as well. So having these conversations about, I think that joke is really funny, or what if we did this? It was a completely different experience. And so that helped with kind of figuring out where I fit in versus what's available to me and where I may be at the moment.
Wow. So was that the moment where you decided I could do this? This isn't, I was laid off, but oh my gosh, like I have these relationships, I have this opportunity, there's this gap here. When did you decide that not going the corporate path was the path?
Yeah, so I think back on it and there's an element of, I don't want to take too much credit for bravery that I did not have. There was for a while I'm like I need to get another job. I need to go back into the corporate space. And to be honest, the economy is what kept me from going back in because in the beginning I was like I'm focused on getting another job and got close on a couple agency interviews and all of that and it never worked out, but I would notice people on LinkedIn or just conversations or seeing people who had more experience than me in the field of marketing who were like, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. I just got laid off. Hey, I'm looking for a job." And I would just keep, "Wait, if he's looking for a job, like wait, what's going on?" And as that kept piling up, there was this like, I don't know if it's, as easy to get back into this as you would imagine. And fast forward 2 years, it became so big that it was a national story of like, no, people are getting laid off in droves and it's happening at this massive level. And so that kind of kept me from going back and kind of saying, hey, I don't think anyone's going to save you. You're going to need to figure this thing out, and brought me back to the, hey, I've done this before. Here's what I'm going to do. And my first pivot was to go into entertainment and marketing consulting and see how I can build things from there. Before even moving to AI.
I had a similar experience, but in reverse, where I was still employed and I saw incredibly talented people being laid off. And that was the beginning for me, which was if they can get laid off, I need to figure out my path. And I think it actually helped blunt the impact of the layoff for me. Because I started to think about it even before it happened, among with other things. You really get a sense of if you are aware of what's going on, I think it can help shape the decisions that you make. So you really applied that kind of 360 awareness on the economy and what's going on to actually chart that path.
Yeah, no, and I think having that awareness or seeing that, full circle helps you realize that one, it's not just happening to you. And then two, there's something bigger going on outside of you, and you should move accordingly.
Do you see that shift there as were you answering a call? Were you following a passion? Were you just like, wow, I love this work and I've built some relationships. Let's see how it works. How did you process this internally, coming from within, even before you started any of these ventures?
Yeah, I think that, I started making that connection of this is a passion of mine. That the communities, the folks that look like me, especially after I got laid off, there was an element of like, wow, I'm kind of surprised that I got to where I got to. I had climbed the corporate ladder the most of anyone in my family because it was an immigrant family and it was, everybody's nurses. I had a brother who became a pharmacist and he was, a small business owner. And then my younger brother, who ended up kind of surpassing me on corporate lens, was the only other person really doing corporate America. So there was an element of looking back and thinking about the interactions I've had to get to this point, interviews where I remember when I was working to get this job on Wall Street, I had an interview and I was asked, where are you from? And I said Newark. And the look of how did you even get here? That was so clear and visible of just like, what do you mean Newark? The city, is there another Newark? I'm like, no, it's the Newark you're thinking of. Yeah, I did make it here and realizing that like, it's not common for people who grew up like me in the neighborhoods that I grew up to even get to this place. And when you are in those places, it's not as satisfying as you thought it would be. Like I realize it's not as satisfying as just being like, yeah, I work at this place and I do marketing. It's not as satisfying as I thought it would be. And the things that were the most satisfying were when I would go back to my communities, when I wrote the book. The book is specifically takes place in Newark. It's a fantasy novel that takes place in the hood. Like I was like, this is just not something I've ever seen before. Like either it is the poverty porn and everything is just so terrible and this is how we get through it, or fantasy and whimsy and just what could be is in completely different characters and all of that. So when I wrote the book, when I would talk to people about the book, when parents would say, hey, I got this book for my son, here's how he reacted. I like lived off of those. These were the most important moments in my life. On a hard day, I would think back to like, man, there was a kid in Chicago who I've never met before who wrote me a fan letter. That's crazy. I'm going to keep moving to do those things because if I can keep stacking my life with those moments that actually resonate with me and they're not maybe the biggest things like a fan letter, while it is a big deal, it's not the Super Bowl, it's not going to these massive things, but I remember feeling like this is actually lasting with me much longer. I feel much more connected to it. I feel prouder. I need to find ways to do that more often, even if it's on a smaller scale.
Man, there's one thing I'm really enjoying, especially as you're sharing these stories, is you have such a self-awareness of what moves you, what makes you go on the inside. And it comes out as you share these stories. And I'm hoping you drop more gems so our audience can kind of pick those. In the midst of our busy, busy lives and so much distraction, we lose our voices and we become echoes of everything outside. And there's so much need to pause now and really just, does this thing do it for me, like core me? And is this
Mhm.
the path I really want to go on? Am I really deeply enjoying this? Do I find the fulfillment of it all? And so, as much as you can, do feel free to drop those gems as we go along because they are incredibly powerful as you share your story.
No, I appreciate that. I think that is where it kind of comes down to. On the other end, we would part of what I did was, managing decks and preparation and all of these things. And at Anheuser-Busch, you were always moving a mile a minute. And what I would see, the things that were the most draining was not necessarily if you had to work hard or that this took a long time. It would be the things that ended up not going anywhere, that ended up being a part of the just, we like to make a deck just to have that deck on file. And I know you spent, 6 hours on it, but we're not even going to bring it up in the call. And those things were so frustrating to me that when I felt the opposite of, being recognized or getting in front of the person I want to get in front of and doing the thing, I, was kind of able to make that connection and then have a restock of like how much of my job is the first and how much of my job is the latter. And most of my job was the first. And there were just sprinkles of the latter. And for a while it was, well, that's what the money is for. So if I can get paid to put up with some things that maybe I don't love so that 3 times a year I do these projects that I do love, then maybe that's fine. Maybe that's okay. That's what I'll do. And getting laid off and then taking stock of like what was my life like for the last 6 months How many
Mm.
conversations did I have with people where I'm trying to convince them to do a thing? How many conversations where I'm frustrated where other people are not seeing how dope this is or how we should do this and all of that? I kind of realized that like I was rationalizing, okay, give myself 3 a month or 3 a year and it'll be fine. I was really rationalizing a way to deal with living with what I didn't really enjoy that much because of the money, which makes sense, of course.
Wow, what a powerful story. It's a great transition to your journey to First Street. Could you walk us through the origin story? How did that all get started?
So, I'm laid off. I'm going through the process of trying to find another corporate role. My brother is working at Microsoft at the time, so he is fully employed. And we've talked about for years. We love to work together, do something together. And funny enough, before when I worked in PNC Bank, I worked at PNC Bank in the retail bank on the investment side. So if you came in and you had money that you were looking to invest in a portfolio, I need mutual funds, or maybe I need to start a retirement account or something, I would be the person in that particular branch who they would say, oh, you should go talk to him. So whenever I would meet with people, they usually were entrepreneurs. They usually had a good amount of money. And at that time, I was not really enjoying my career and I was trying to figure out like, I think the success in life is making as much money as you possibly can, right? So this is me before kind of getting to where I was at Anheuser-Busch. And I remember having conversations with folks where there was one black brother who came in and I said, I see you in here in the middle of the day all the time. And you have money that you want to invest. Like, what is it that you do? And he said, I sell landlines in the Caribbean. And this is like 2015 or 2016. I'm like, what? You sell landlines in the Caribbean. And so he goes on to explain essentially, no, of course I didn't start off thinking I'm going to sell landlines in the Caribbean. No, that's who thinks that? I just kind of stumbled in and realized that there's just so many things you can do that are not making an app, not doing the super flashy thing. There's just so many opportunities internationally, all of these things. So me and my brother would have a shorthand where we were like, one day we're gonna work together and we're gonna sell landlines in the Caribbean. And we would know that was our way of saying, I don't care what it is. We just need to make money because the way this world is set up, you need to make money and then you go figure out how you enjoy your life when you have money. And so as we fast forward to the layoff, I throw the bat signal up like maybe we should work together. We're going to sell landlines in the Caribbean, and that's going to be marketing consulting. I'm going to take advantage of these partnerships that I've started. And what actually changed it to AI was that I was having a conversation with really great contact and colleague that I've worked with at Harlem's Fashion Row. And it's a nonprofit in New York that focuses on platforming and amplifying and partnering with Black designers and connecting them to the fashion world, the Nordstroms, the Gaps of the world. And so I was always really a fan of their work, of their CEO, Brandis Daniels, and everything that they did. And so in the conversation with them, I was talking about I'm doing marketing consulting on my own, and I'd love to come to one of your events to talk to these designers about influencer partnerships and all of that. And they're like, okay, that sounds good. And in that conversation, I talked about how much AI revamped my business. And that's what in that conversation, she's like, you know what people would really need to know? That AI stuff that you're talking about. People are really worried about that. The designers we see are really worried about that. They don't know what to do with it. There's a million people talking about influencer marketing. Maybe you should do that. And from there, had my first like paid conversation about AI and the responses that everybody had. I mean, people, I need to talk to you afterwards. Could I pull you to the side? Because I was so worried about this. I've never heard anybody talk about it in this very plain way. I thought I was already too late. And that kind of, I had that triggering moment of like, oh, this is like the feeling I had when I was working with my people back at Anheuser-Busch, where I'm like, this is such a fulfilling day. I'm so glad I imparted that. I need to do this at full time, big scale. This is what it's going to be. No more marketing consulting. We're going to teach people how to use AI the way that we use it because one, we see that most people don't and it's hurting them. And then two, you have an opportunity to bring it to the folks who we really care about because we think that that will change the world. This big change and this massive platform and this massive technology change, if we bring it to us and we give ourselves the same starting point that everybody else gets, what does that look like in 5 years, 10 years?
Wow. And so the folks that you're working with, traditionally speaking, these things tend to come later to our underrepresented communities, and you bring it to the forefront while it's current. Everybody's learning it all at the same time. What does that look like in practice when we say AI is practical and culturally relevant?
I think in practice, a few things that I notice is that the national conversation about AI and then the conversation on the street with the average worker are wildly different. So if you are in tech, if you're on social media, I mean, just by design of how social media works, middle of the road commentary is not going to get any likes, it's not going to get any clicks. Everything is driven by the extremes. So either people are saying, this is a waste of time. Look at all these foolish things that it does. Here's a story of this lawyer who submitted AI briefs and got, called out for it. And this is going to take over the world. We need to, or, it's going to destroy us. We need to stop it. Or the other side where people were talking about super complicated applications and how are you going to make who's going to become the next billionaire making agentic workflows and this like very disparate conversation. But when I would talk to people, they're like, so what's the website? And I'm like, it's chatgpt.com. Okay. Okay. So I don't know, like what, and these are senior people. These are people not not particularly in our communities or like with clients. These are people who are supposed to be leaders in this space. And when we would talk about, well, what are you doing with it? What do you envision it to do? Everyone had the use case or the prompts that they were told. I heard that it does this well, but it doesn't do that well for me. And so we would move the conversation to it's not just point and click. It's not Google. It has so much more capability, but it really comes from you and the language you use, the way you communicate. How well do you even understand the thing that you want it to do? Because that's going to affect it. And as we would do those workshops and those conversations, people would really unlock they would kind of see it. They would realize well, this is different. And they'd start going into their head about like, if I could do that, then that means I could create, and you were just, yup, absolutely. Absolutely. Keep thinking, what else could you do? And that part, when I did that with corporate clients, nonprofit clients who were not in my community, I knew that this is going to translate really well because the creativity, it comes from us. The culture, it comes from us. And so how much is the world missing out if we don't take advantage of the fact that like, hey, there is this tech now, and it actually is driven by your own creativity, the way you see things, the stories you want to tell, the information you want to pull forward. That became the vision.
Wow, that is incredible. Were there any stories of businesses or communities that stand out to you that latched onto this and saw some magic happen?
I remember doing a workshop for some folks at the New Jersey Department of Labor, and it was a real mix of people who there were some 25-year-olds who this is my first job, and I've been using AI a couple times, and we have this job training, so I'm here. And then there were older folks who were about to retire. We had one person who had already retired and came back to help because they were short staffed. And so in that same room, we're exposing them to AI for the very first time. And there was so much trepidation, so much like, here's this big hype thing and all of those things. And so, I start the conversation off like, you are the same people who were told you need to get into the metaverse. You are the same people who were told you need to get NFTs. So when I tell you that you need to do AI, I get it. I get you being like, okay, here we go. All right, what is it? What is the new thing that I'm already behind? No, it makes perfect sense. And so I come from that place of like, none of us want to waste our time on that. We're busy. We have things that we want to do. We want to really kind of get to what's really helpful. And so coming from that place and then talking about actually you drive this, right? This is an Excel. I'm not going to teach you a formula that you need to memorize. You drive it. Think of this as your highly competent intern. How would you guide your intern? How much context would you give them? How much support would you give them? What would you ask them to do? And when people would make suggestions, I would say, now, if you wanted your intern to do that, what other information would you need to give them? Oh, I would need to also tell them this and that. Okay, you see how this is still logical? We've not gone into some realm of like memorizing tricks. It's still logic. And that was very empowering for people. That was one of the first workshops because that retired senior researcher who had come back to be on the team and was like, I almost don't even use computers that often. I'm just, I really am pretty old school. felt empowered to use AI because it's like it's actually logic, but I get what you're saying, and I'm excited about using it. And that was one where it really, again, coming back and saying that was so fulfilling, and that was so clarifying about what we're doing and how different it is than other people.
So, for somebody who feels intimidated by AI and what they're hearing around them, where should they start?
If you're intimidated and all of that, I feel the biggest thing is you need to just use it. You need to try it out and give yourself permission to try some things, not really make any sense, like learn along the way. Ideally, you would have great guidance, you'd have some great training to help you shortcut that trial and error phase. But I think above all else, it's not a theoretical thing. It's not a thing that you're like, I'm just going to keep reading about it. And then when my job or my business requires AI, I'll know enough because I've been reading about it for the last 3 years or the last 2 years. It doesn't really work like that. Like it really is. You have to use it. You have to see the responses that it gives you and be able to kind of sit with that and see what that means for you. It's so specific to you that it's hard to just talk about in a vacuum. It's hard to just say it could do these things, it could do those things. You have to kind of see what it does and make that connection and then make those like, oh, okay, if I could do that, let me try this other thing out.
How would you frame AI as an opportunity versus a threat?
As an opportunity in any big infrastructure change, massive change, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of pain, to be honest. There's going to be job losses, job changes. There's going to be freezing and hiring as people are or organizations are figuring out which skills do we even value. So when I think of AI as, or how does that become an opportunity, I think it really comes down to understanding what value you want to provide and finding and using AI to help you execute that. When you really understand that, like at the end of the day, you are the strategist, you're the head coach, whatever metaphor you need, this is your team that helps you execute on those things. Now you can get lazy and just give it to your team to do the things and handle it for you, or you can get very strategic about it, where not only are you using it to execute things, you're also having it help you get better at your own thinking, right? So if we go back to the sports metaphor, we go back to the coach. While you may be the head coach, you might have a coach that just focuses on defense. Now, you may have some things that you're like, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. But your defensive coach, who is an expert in defense, will come up with ideas that you never thought of. And that's great. AI allows you to say, could you tell me more about that? Like, could we sit here and explore that idea that I've never heard of before? Let's explore that and get it from a general idea to what we're going to do on Sunday. And that is what folks really have the opportunity to do. I call it the sandbox, where not only can you play, design, work on things, interrogate things, learn things, and all in one chat, then create an output that is based on that and feel confident in that output because you've gone through the checks and balances and asked and figured out what assumptions are being made, the parts that you didn't really understand, you got a better understanding of it, just stuff that was just not possible with Google. And when I compare it, I tell people like your frame of reference is Google. That is how we collected information we did not know before. You would just go on Google, ask the question. And so our thinking also aligns with that. If I know I need to do 10 steps, I'm going to Google for step 1, then step 2, then the next question, then the next question. Whereas now it's a reset where it's like, well, let's just talk about what you're trying to do. Because if we know what you're trying to do, you're going on Google and you get used to the fact that it's giving you kind of generic answers that you then mentally apply to the thing that you need to do. AI allows you to just do that from the very beginning. Don't give me the generic answer. This is what I'm trying to do. This is why I want to do it. This is what I want it to accomplish. Let's work on it from there. So it's having someone kind of sitting with you and saying, all right, let's do it. Let's figure it out. And that change mentally is tough. But when you do make that change, it's really powerful.
Agreed. And the interesting thing is the acceleration that takes place where you don't have to start from scratch. You're literally going faster because you have all these things at your fingertips. One of the things I love about First Street, this focus on underrepresented communities, you're very intentional there that folks don't get left behind. How do business and community leaders make AI more accessible? There are for sure obvious gaps in this technology and how it gets used in communities. How can leaders respond to that to ensure that folks don't get left behind and they're at the seat at the table?
Yeah, I think a big thing is going to be public and private and government partnerships to get this information to folks in a scale. I think there is an element of the markets will handle themselves. The companies that have money to train people will train their people, and they'll hire people who got training in, the institutions and the colleges that had the money to pivot and add AI training to, what they were doing. Everyone else, you figure it out on your own. And I think if we want this to be the success that the money is saying we want it to be, right? The amount of investment is saying that we want it to be, then there has to be a concentrated effort of getting it to employees at companies. Not saying we have ChatGPT now, go off and be blessed and tell me how things work out, and then getting surprised that it's not really working. Having really quality training there, having workforce development. We're in the process of doing workforce development for AI training for the state of New Jersey as one of the first organizations to do that. And I think that's incredibly important because of getting that in front of people, giving them an opportunity to play with it, to play around with it. So I think the open AIs, the Googles of the world, everyone has a stake in having a larger group of people who really understand this because of what comes out of it. And a perfect example is social media. Social media expanded the amount of people who can weigh in on any particular topic. And because of that, you get a bunch of bad stuff, but then you get a bunch of really brilliant things. And the phrase I always love is like the internet is undefeated. The internet is undefeated because if I put something out there for a joke, I may know 5 really funny people in my life, right? And so maybe I'm around people who come up with some good jokes or whatever it is. But on the internet, the guy is not a stand-up comedian, but is just naturally incredibly clever and funny, also has an opportunity to say a joke on that same thing. So how many comments do you see where you're like, and I've gone to, as a writer, I write stuff down where I'm like, that's one of the funniest things I've ever heard. That's so clever. How did you make that connection? That's incredible. It's because the access is so wide that, yeah, if 100 million people are coming up with their best jokes, we're going to get a bunch of really good jokes that, that come off on this thing. And so for AI, it's the same thing. If you expand it, if 100 million people are looking at what can I do with AI, you're going to get a bunch of things that are much better than what you might have thought of.
As you look at First Street and the impact that you all are starting to make, where do you see this impact going in the next 12, 18 months when it comes to underrepresented communities, when it comes to small business empowerment with AI? How do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes of all time is actually from Tupac Shakur, is one of my favorite rappers of all time, and he had a quote that he said, "I may not change the world, but I guarantee I will spark the mind that does." And for us, there is that feeling of like, maybe I won't change the world, but let me guarantee that I'll spark the mind that does. So in the future, like, what does this look like in 5 years? If you're bringing this really quality training, human-centered training, helping people really find themselves in the way that they use this tool, I want to say that I contributed to these advancements in this thing because someone else who now really feels like they own it and understand how it can apply to them can create something that we would have never thought of when we were first doing it. And you only get access to it, or you only see it because of the people who got brought in. People only solve the problems that are problems for them, or where they're going to make money from those problems. I mean, in a capitalistic society, that's how it works. I solve my problems, or I solve problems that I can make money off of. And so there's a ton of things that no one cares about because they may not be able to make money off of it, or it may not be their problem. And so if you allow AI and everything that comes with it to this group of people who have different problems, not have been focused on as much, you get solutions that benefit the entire society, because now this group of people are able to say, it's a problem I have that a lot of people like me have, but we didn't think was important to solve. I've solved it.
Wow, Monk, that's incredible. And, it's interesting your journey from doing all these amazing things to finding your voice, to being laid off, to rediscovering your voice, and now charting this path that is creating so much opportunity and impact. It's just amazing. For folks who've been listening to your story about being laid off, or let me put it this way, folks who've been laid off and are considering next steps, what would you advise them to do?
I think there is a forgiving yourself in the beginning, which naturally, when something bad happens, you think about how you contributed to it and how you probably are getting punished for XYZ mistake that you had. And in the corporate world, especially for Black and Brown folks, there's probably a lot of things that are going to come up in your Rolodex, right? Because not only are you navigating the process of being in the corporate space, you're navigating that process of being in the corporate space looking the way that you do. So now, and I know for me, I'm replaying conversations that I had and thinking to myself, like, oh, was I too much of a threat in that situation? Is that why, on the chopping block? Did I come off too cocky? This, you could spiral because there's just so many things, and just kind of getting to there's a big thing going on outside of you that you can't really control. Even if you did have some aspects to it, you got to forgive yourself and give yourself some time to then go into, what do I want to do? If money wasn't an issue, what is it that I want to do? What were the parts of my job that I really enjoyed? What was the thing that I said, I'll do this so that I can get to that? How do I just get to that? Not go through the steps and then just exploring that, continuing to explore why. Why do you like that? Why is that important to you? Why is that, what are some ways that works before you then apply the economic aspect of, like, how do I make money off of that, the ways to make it happen. But there's an element of forgiving yourself, figuring out what you really want to do, what type of life you really want to lead, because it's very easy, especially in America, to be told this is what good life is, the amount of money, where you live, the things you consume. And in an area where you're getting laid off, you have some time, or it's a great time to say, is that what you really wanted? Are you okay with what it will take to get back there? If you're like, no, I do need to live in a gated community, I do need to consume these things, and I'm okay with everything that goes with it. Okay, more power to you. But I think you'll surprise yourself if you take some time and really think about that, because there's going to be large aspects of it that you're like, actually, I don't care about that. And I don't know. I was chasing it because I was told I need to chase it.
Wow, that is so refreshing to hear when it comes to reflecting and then deciding on what's next. I have really enjoyed this conversation. Lost track of time completely. This has been absolutely fantastic. Monk, where can people find you, follow your work, support your work, including getting engaged with First Street Partnerships?
So we are at First Street Partnerships. Our website is firststreet.co, the number one street.co. I'm on LinkedIn, Inyang. We're also on Instagram. But we love to hear from folks. Our email address is info@firststreet.co. To talk AI, how we can help you, how we can help your team. That's what we do.
Folks, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really enjoyed this conversation and learned so much of it. I'm going through this myself, so thank you, Monk. If today's story inspired you, please subscribe to the channel and share it with somebody who needs to hear this. If you also have any questions or suggestions, you can drop them below. I look and answer those personally. For more insights, please join our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, and School Community of Legends, rewriting what's possible after a layoff. Remember, every ending holds the blueprint for a new beginning. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you on the next podcast. Bye, everyone.